A U.S. Senator with your Asian heritage. I know you have the Chinese and Thai heritage. And Tammy's grandparents came from Canton, China. And how does this special moment, the 80th anniversary of the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act, mean to you?
Well, it's so incredibly important because if this country is going to be a nation of equal, where everybody has an opportunity to strive for that American dream, then we all must be able to be equal under the law. And the Chinese Exclusion Act specifically excluded Chinese Americans. And then later on, with the internment of the Japanese Americans, again, another group of Asians were excluded. And this is something that is a shameful part of American history. So I celebrate the 80th anniversary, but I also want to remind people of this part of American history. It's important to not forget so that we never, ever do that again. Because let me tell you, when countries move along and we confront world global events, it is very easy to descend back into distrust. It is easy to descend back into isolating groups of people because they look different, they speak different, they eat different, they pray different. And that's not what this country is about. And so it is really important to continue to acknowledge the existence of the Chinese Exclusion Act, but also to celebrate the repeal of that act, and to celebrate the achievements of Asian Americans all across this country, and how we could not be the nation we are today without the labor, without the contributions of Asian American and Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians across this country. And so celebrations like today are really near and dear to my heart because I feel that this makes America stronger for the future.
To follow what you just said, we human beings tend to have short-term memories. We often forget history lessons. And what do you think specifically we Asian Americans have to do to make sure that the history of Chinese Exclusion Act, the Japanese internment camp, such bad spots in our history will never repeat itself again?
Well, two things. One, we need to become more actively involved in how this country is run. I think there is a tradition, especially among Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities to keep your head down and work hard and do better for the next generation. But we have to be loud voices also, and this is where we need to count on and learn from the generations of activists before us, but also grow the next generation of activists. I am the first Asian American elected to the United States Senate not from Hawaii. That's wrong. That's bad. We are such a big part of the American population, at least 4% of the senators, of the 100 senators, at least 4% should be. There should be 4 Asian Americans outside of Hawaii elected to the Senate. And yet there is one, and it took until 2016. That shows that we are not being represented the way we should be in the halls of power. And I'll give you an example about not allowing history to forget the contributions of Chinese Americans, for example. In Illinois, we became the first state in the country to require the teaching of Asian American history in all of our schools. And we passed that as a law after we elected Asian Americans to our state legislature. We should be doing that all across the country so that the next generation of kids learn the history.
Indeed. Tammy, we Chinese Americans or Asian Americans often would become doctors, engineers, businessmen, even lawyers. But very few of us would become politicians. And what would you advise the young Asian American kids who has the aspiration to get into politics, yet they do not see a good model in their family that would lead them to American politics? They would be interested but hesitating. What advice would you give to them? Because you are a shining example of how Asian Americans could be very good politicians. We have so much to contribute to this country. what can we do to get involved into politics, to learn from you, to be a shining star in American politics?
Thank you. So 2 things. I would speak to the young people, but I would also speak to their parents. Not a lot of Asian parents want their kids to go into politics, right? And it is important to show that there's a path forward, a path into leadership in politics. And so I have been working with a lot of groups, for example, to set up more internships on Capitol Hill, because that is the pathway into becoming a staff member or a chief of staff or a legislative director, and then yourself running for office. You see this a lot with some of my colleagues who, they were Senate pages, and their uncle was a senator, and now they're senators. But we don't see that as much in the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community, and we have to make sure that that is a valid, respected pathway. What I say to the young people is get involved. Take that passion and get involved. And get involved. Your first thing that you run for does not have to be United States Congress or United States Senate. There are really important roles in all of our communities, like trustee on your school board. Who do you think decides what books are put into the library of your local library that your kids will have to study? And if there's a lack of books on Asian history, why is that? Well, you need to have people on the Board of Trustees, so the local library. You need to have PTA members. You need students to be part of their student senate. All of that is important because you gain the experience. You may not end up running for higher office later, but you gain that experience of being an advocate. And that can lead you to have a greater voice, no matter what profession you choose, and still influence the government and the country. And so that as you rise in the ranks in your profession, yes, if you're a politician and you want to do that, that's great. But if you are active in civic culture in America and you rise in whatever field, you may be that person that the next president of the United States taps you to be the transportation secretary because you have risen in those ranks. And we need people like that who are active, who are civically minded, civically engaged, but also professions in their own fields to also come over and participate and help lead this nation, whether it's as an elected official or as an appointee.
Thank you. I bet that your remark will encourage a lot Asian kids to step forward to get into politics in the future.
And their parents to let them.
Yes, indeed. We got to let our kids know. And Senator, also, I have to say that we need a leader of our Asian American leaders. And what can we do to support you, to help you, or to help good politicians like you, so that you can move forward to do more in the governing and politics of this country? What can we do for you?
I think engaging with your local leaders. Unfortunately, we're in a time now with, on the national security front, there is a competition between the United States in terms of the military, in terms of national security, and the PRC. And that is bleeding over into other areas, and you see a rise of protectionist and xenophobic tendencies that happens often in America. It's happened in cycles throughout our history. And I will tell you that in the more conservative parts of my state, there is very much an anti-Chinese sentiment. And I spend a lot of time correcting my colleagues and saying, you need to say, this is a policy of the PRC communist government. This is not all Chinese people. And there is a difference between people of Chinese origin and Chinese people and the policies of a government that is in power. And you have to separate that. And that is why it is important for us to engage and teach people that you can't lump all people who are racially or ethnically Chinese in one box, because we don't all have a unified worldview, and we certainly don't all represent the viewpoints of the Chinese Communist government. However, we do need to remind people that we are part of America, that we are a valuable resource, so that if we do want to engage with the government of the PRC, having Asian Americans, having Chinese Americans who can speak the various languages, who can make those connections, whether it is culturally, whether it is through education, whether it's through business, is actually an advantage we have in the United States. We have that advantage because we have Americans of Chinese descent who can be the ones to participate in that and elevate our engagement. Yes, there's going to be global competition. There's global competition in terms of the military. There's also global competition when it comes to economics. But let me tell you, my home state of Illinois, our top 3 products are soybean, corn, and pork. Who do you think my biggest customer is? So we have to engage economically. And it is important to maintain that economic engagement. And that is where Chinese Americans in business in particular can be very helpful in promoting that and explaining that. We just had a PRC company, Go Motion, just build a factory in Illinois that's created like 1,000 jobs, 1,000 union jobs in Illinois. That's a good thing. We should talk about that. That's an electric battery company. That is good for moving towards a green future, a carbon-free future. We don't get to that future as a nation without the participation of the PRC and the rest of the world. And so basically, we can't go it alone. And we have the best tools already to not have to go it alone, to really support our leadership role on a global scale because of the diversity of who is American. We are American. This room is American. It's just as American as my dad's side of the family that has been in the United States for over 200 years. And that is an important message to get across.
Thank you so much, Tammy. So privileged to have you here. At last, do you have anything else to say to us?
Just welcome. I hope you take the time to enjoy these historic buildings. And remember, this is your house. If you're an American, this is your house as well. And as you meet with people and talk to people, make your voices heard. It is important. And sometimes you have to knock really loud on the door to make your voices heard. But that is important. That is how we move the country forward, and it's how we maintain and grow our global role as a leader of the free world. And I'm just so grateful to know that I'm not alone in this effort, that I have all of you who are also working from your perspectives as well. And really importantly, let's help me grow the next generation of leaders in this country, especially when it comes to civic engagement, because we have such passionate young people, and they're so brilliant, and they're so active, whether they go into business or into government or into politics, but we have to support them as they choose to run for office, and we have them running for office all over the country. Support those candidates, whether it's Republican or Democrat. I don't care what party. Well, okay, I do care. But I would rather the Democrats, but it's also important to engage to get Asian Americans elected on the Republican side as well, because it is about the strength of this nation, and we don't get there without Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders having a seat at the table, but nobody's going to give us a seat at the table. We have to take that seat and say, that's my seat, I'm going to sit here.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Let's remember that, and let us, especially the ones from Illinois, let's support Tammy and support her all the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A typical immigrant family story.